Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Hacker Factory. I'm your host, Phillip Wylie. I refer to myself as the hacker maker because I teach and mentor aspiring pentesters. This show is an extension of those efforts, which are my passions. In each episode, I get to share some of my really cool hacker friends and pentester friends in the community that have stories that will hopefully inspire you and motivate you to become a pentester. So today I have with me Joe Helle. So Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? You've got a really interesting background, very unusual for most hackers or pen testers.
No, I'm boring. So Army veteran. I served in the airborne. I was in Iraq in 2006 and 2007. I went to Afghanistan in 2009. Came out of the Army and went right into public service. Been a paramedic before kind of working with some nonprofit groups, one of them being Team Rubicon USA, which is a veteran nonprofit relief organization for many years. And then I went into business for myself, started moonshining in my hometown. I owned a small little craft distillery for several years. And at the same time, ended up running for mayor of my community. Was the elected mayor there for just under 3 years. I ran for our state legislature and lost that race in 2018. And at that point, I kind of felt 18 years old again. I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't want to be in public service anymore. I wanted to do me for a while. So I jumped into IT. I thought, hey, maybe I'll check out IT security. Struck out everywhere I went because you're a guy that is 33 or 34 with no professional IT experience. And I just kind of got tired of being turned down. So started networking hard, and with a lot of hard work and persistence, ended up having my first professional IT job being as a penetration tester, starting last October. And now I'm a senior with my new organization I started with a few weeks ago.
Oh, that's great. That's really good to be able to jump in your first job in pen testing. I mean, so that just goes to show the audience, the listeners, that, go for it. Don't limit yourself. Don't let yourself be a limiting factor, because sometimes people don't think they're good enough, and you just get out there and you never can't tell, someone's going to give you the opportunity. A lot of cases you deserve the opportunities, but you just don't know if you try. Some people are, think that they're not worthy or not ready yet. And, you see people give people chances all the time. It's kind of like whenever I started pen testing, I had sysadmin experience and I had worked in security and application security, ran some vulnerability scanners, but I didn't know how to hack, didn't know how to do pen tests. And fortunately, I applied for the job and got it. So that's, your story is another lesson to learn is, go for it. And as far as the networking goes, that's a really good recommendation there. So could you share your experience of what you did to network and how networking helped you find a job?
Yeah. So, we can start with the failures, right? So trying to jump into, I was looking at trying to get SOC jobs. I came out of WGU with a boatload of certifications, but no professional experience, and nobody wants to hire, a guy for some of those jobs if you haven't sat on the desk for a while, if you haven't pulled cable for a while. And just at my point in my career and in my life, it's a hard sell to take, a $13 or $14 an hour job as a help desk technician doing things that really you have no interest in doing. So after enough turndowns, I just really pragmatic and persistent. So I decided that if people weren't going to pay attention to me, I was going to put myself in front of them in a way where they couldn't ignore me anymore. So I started streaming. I started making the right impressions on the right people with LinkedIn, and started building a Twitter following. And eventually, I made enough of a positive impression, I think, with enough people that one day I was just kind of tired of being turned down for pen test gigs. And I said, what in the world's going on here? I can, stream 5 days a week, educational content. I can mentor people. I can teach people, but nobody will actually give me a chance myself. Here's what I can do. And there was a lot of folks who couldn't believe that I was unemployed, that I wasn't being given a chance. So I went from 50 plus applications with really no calls, no contact. Half the time it wasn't even a denial, to 3 interviews and 2 offers, within 2 weeks of putting out a Twitter and a LinkedIn post saying why is this happening? So networking is 100% why I got, into the field, or how I got into the field. But leading back to what we were talking about before, that it's possible, it's also incredibly hard. I don't want to give people the wrong perception that it's easy. I hustled my butt off. It was constant work. It was prepping for streams. It was streaming. It was writing. It was creating videos and content, and a lot of really hard work. So, but if you have the time, you have the patience, you have the the persistence, and the will to do it, and you can get there. So I'm adding a caveat to kind of that first part of the conversation, and that yes, you can do it. You absolutely can. I'm living proof of it. But those results aren't the rule. They're somewhat the exception. But you can achieve them. Again, all you have to do is make those right impressions with the right people, and show them what you're worth, and show them your value. And the right people will eventually see it.
Yeah, that's great advice. The networking piece, even for those of you that don't get into the streaming and stuff, social media through LinkedIn and Twitter are great. But, as Joe mentioned here, the streaming and that sort of stuff is a way to get yourself out there a lot quicker and get a little more exposure, because, you can do blog posts, you can write on Medium, you can do YouTube videos, and you get a lot more, it's amazing the exposure you can get that way. And you have to take advantage of it. You see a lot of artists these days, recording artists, and it escapes me the person's name now, but I was just learned recently about this guy that was doing like music on TikTok, and he got invited to do his cover of a Papa Roach song. So he's actually on one of the remixes of the album, actually, or the song with Papa Roach, which is kind of interesting. So nowadays, the internet and social media, there's so many great opportunities out there. But like Joe said, it's not easy. You have to work hard. You got to be persistent. That's one of the things Joe did, is he was persistent. He just didn't give up. So you just have to keep trying. And that's one of the things employers are going to want to see. Are you going to keep trying? So if you want to hire a pen tester, you want someone that's going to keep trying and not giving up.
And, there's alternative things we can do. Like you said, it's not just streaming. It's, being from politics, I wheel and deal. I know what it's like to work with, movers and shakers, so to speak. Identify those people. When you see somebody that's got 200 or 300 likes on a post on LinkedIn, make comments that will leave an impression on somebody after you've said it. Send a message to that person privately. Don't just say, hey, I'd like to connect for my own well-being. Find something about that person that you can connect together with. Make a good first impression. I was talking to some people yesterday. I got in with the Cyber Mentor simply because we lived 30 minutes away from each other growing up. I identified something we had in common, so just sent them a message one day. It wasn't, hey, I'd like to learn more from you. It's, hey, we got something in common. We grew up 30 minutes apart. Small world, right? And that's butted into this crazy relationship and friendship. Now I'm working for the guy. I'm a senior pen tester with his with his company, and really good friends with each other. So, in addition to some of the more difficult things, the streaming, the writing, a lot of folks are or introverted. They've got a hard time putting themselves out, face and name, etc. But if you're on a platform like LinkedIn, find those decision makers, find those people who have the influence, and make the impression. And I cannot beg of people enough to take that advice. If there's anything else they hear from this conversation today, make that strong impression and make it sound more than just you're there to try to use that person. Because you probably get the messages all the time on LinkedIn. I know I get them all the time. We want to I want to connect with you because I think there's so much I could learn from you. That's great, but I'm never going to remember who you are. Mm-hmm. Leave something with the person you're contacting that they're going to remember. And eventually there's going to be enough of this network of influencers, of decision makers that are going to identify who you are. And when you post something like, hey, I'm looking for work, you're going to say, hey, I've talked to that person before. I remember them. They made this impression. What do I have for them?
Yeah, that's great advice there. Because a lot of times you get, a LinkedIn DM and someone, can you help me? And they don't give you information. So you've kind of got to tell your background and, like Joe said, give them something to remember you by, try to connect, make a meaningful conversation, because a lot of times people like Joe and myself are pretty busy. And if it's just some generic little, hey, thanks for connecting with me thing, then you just say thank you or don't, or just go on and not acknowledge it. Not that we're trying to pay attention to you, but people are trying to put their attention where it needs to be. Sometimes people are just saying, hey, good to connect with you, and that's it. So if you put some effort in there, let them know what you're doing and that sort of thing, then that's definitely helpful. And as Joe was mentioning, the streaming and stuff, that's another person that really built their image. So more than one thing that you and the Cyber Mentor had in common was his presence for streaming and doing his Udemy courses and YouTube content. So that's another person that did that. So Joe's not just one of those just a one-time person to do that. That's a common thing. So that's Heath is a great inspiration too. It's been interesting to see the stuff he's posted and the business and the career and lifestyle this guy has built. It's pretty amazing.
It's incredible.
Motivational. Yeah.
Yeah. What he's done is nothing short, but like you said, inspirational. And I think a lot of people realize that you've got this guy who, didn't come from the best upbringings, who's really self-made. He's busted his butt and he's identified, paths and those right relationships to make and made those correct impressions early on, and just had drive. He was teaching on I&E long before anybody knew about the Udemy stuff. He put, a course for us, the OSCP up there for a prep course, I think, but probably cost I&E some letters at some point, but
yeah.
But it's making those impressions. So again, Phil, if you're like me, you get 100 or 200, connection requests a week on LinkedIn. And, I started getting to the point where I put on my profile, message me if you want that connection. But out of those 200 connections I get a week, I'm going to remember one or two of them maybe. So be that person who I'm going to remember. Be that person Philip's going to remember. Be that person, Don or the Cyber Mentor is going to remember. Yeah. Because those are the influencers that are going to lead you down the right path, that are going to help you get to where you're trying to be. And again, I don't remember who you are if you don't impress me.
And that's going back to what your experience with Heath, the Cyber Mentor. You made a connection. So when you're networking with people, it's more than just adding someone to your LinkedIn or follow them on Twitter. It's forming connections, because you get to know people. Then, Joe sees an entry-level pen testing position open and you've been communicating. He's got a little bit of idea about your skills and what you're looking for. There's a good chance he could pass that job on to you. So those are the people that are getting the opportunities.
Absolutely.
So what's your advice for someone that's getting started? I mean, I know you have your OSCP and some eLearn certifications, I believe, as well. So what do you, as far as education for someone who's wanting to become a pen tester, what do you recommend there? And do you think certifications are required?
My opinion versus industry opinion are two different things. Some of the best pen testers I know don't have OSCP. Yep. Some of the best pen testers I know have failed the OSCP. It's because it's not a pen test exam. It's more or less capture the flaggy, and you have to be good in that realm, or get lucky and get great boxes, or get unlucky and get really hard, bad boxes. My advice is to diversify your educational portfolio. Look at more than just the offerings or the requirements. OSCP is great, but it's beginning to lose its market value, in my opinion, as more and more people earn it. Mm-hmm. It's no different than anything else when it comes to economics. The more people have something, the less it's going to be valued. And then your employer is going to say, hey, how do we weed out these 40 people who have OSCP? Well, we're going to start looking at OSCP, or we're going to start looking at I&E courses or eLearn or whatever it is they consider to be applicable to their job position. So diversify your educational or your certificate portfolio. Make sure that you have more than just what everybody else is coming in with. So if OSCP is a requirement, get something else too. Get a certificate, like the PTP, to where you understand network pen testing, because you've been tested on it. You haven't just been tested on point and shoot boxes. You've been tested on network pen testing. Look at maybe the EWPT or the OSWP, to say, hey, I'm proficient in web pen testing. Why? Because I've been tested on web pen testing. And additionally, don't look past the value of non-certification education courses. You don't necessarily have to have that piece of paper to show that value, because you're still going to be answering questions. It's still going to happen. So sure, you've got your OSCP, but you've also taken, the PTX course, or you've done the EJPT, or, the threat hunter, whatever course it is. That's additional knowledge that you have that you may be able to leverage over your competing applicants. So diversify. Look at more than just what that job application requirement is. Additionally, look geographically when you're looking for that right certification. Don't Google, what do I need to be a SOC analyst? Don't Google, what do I need to get into pen testing? Oftentimes, if you Google that, for instance, you're going to see CH. I'm sorry, but CH just doesn't hold a lot of value when it comes to pen testing firms anymore, because it's not a practical examination. It's multiple choice. And its value is waning when it comes to competing against other applicants with some of these more advanced certificates. So look geographically, look at what your market says. If you work in DoD, do you need the CH versus CISA? Maybe, depending on who you're applying to. In the private sector, if you live in Charlotte, your requirements might be different than somebody who lives in Tucson, Arizona, or Toledo, Ohio. So don't look at the greater market as a whole. Look where you're applying to. If you're applying in Columbus, Ohio, or Pittsburgh, you're going to have different things, because the people who grew up in the field in that area all grew up with the same thing, most likely, and they're all going to kind of assume and expect some of the same requirements. And you see this with CompTIA versus ISC squared oftentimes. If you've got a city that's got an ISC squared chapter, jobs there are going to probably allow ISC squared certificates. But if you don't have an ISC squared chapter in your area, people aren't going to know what that is, and then you're left to try to explain what this actually is. So diversify, and then look geographically what you're expected to have versus kind of at the whole national market. I think you're going to get overwhelmed coming into the field, and we get it all the time. What am I supposed to do? There's so many different things I need to look at. And you have people weeding themselves out of the field completely because they don't know what the actual expectation is. So,
yeah, it's great advice. So, how would you recommend for someone to get experience? Because getting your foot in the door to get that first experience. So, what are some ways that people can get experience that may not be directly working somewhere? What would be some advice there to get that pen testing experience?
Sure. So. I've got a friend who I've kind of been helping mentor and try to break into the industry. His name is Mike. Last night, he was talking to me about how a hiring manager had talked to him recently and said, hey, you don't have experience. The only thing you're going to be able to expect is lower paying junior positions, which has some truth to it, right? You don't have, professional experience. So there's going to be some amount of training if somebody takes that chance to hire you. Things you can supplement, though. I told him, hey, go ahead and just peruse Google and Google things like, hotel chain, free open source CMS, because a lot of these places also have CVE on their job application requirements. And I found one last night that I'm going to apply for. 10 minutes after I did this, I just Googled, for a CMS from a certain industry. And I started pulling stored cross-site scripting and SQL injection on a 2020, late 2020 version, and their last CVE was early 2019. So, these are things that there was a couple guys on LinkedIn a few months ago who were farming CVEs. They were just going out and they were looking at some of these kind of more free and open source applications and attacking them locally and finding, these weaknesses and submitting them and getting CVEs. That is a great way to shortcut into the industry, because it shows that you've got the aptitude and the knowledge to not only search and research for some of these platforms, but to install them and manage them locally, run them, set them up, as well as attack them and find these issues. So if you have, an employer that's saying, hey, we'll consider HackerOne profiles, we'll consider BugCrowd profiles. I look at those to a lesser extent, simply because a lot of bug hunters are really good at one or two things. They may not be proficient at web app testing in general, but they might be really good at CSRF. They might be really good at finding cross-site scripting attacks or SSTI. But if you can pick up a web app and just attack the crap out of it and essentially do a pen test on it like you would do for a client. And you find these weaknesses, and then you can submit that report to the developer. I think that holds a lot of value, and I think it's really understated in the industry. So we all see this kind of mythical CVE unicorn. Oh, you got a CV, that's awesome, but nobody really talks about, is that a way in before you're employed? And I think it absolutely is. So I think if there was one thing that you could kind of do shortcut, research some open source programs that have, that are doing, that are managing their platform, and see what you can figure out. See if you can find a bug, see if you can submit it, and then use that to leverage with your job application to stand out from other people as well.
That's some great advice, because, a lot of people that are pen testers or security researchers really respect people having CVEs. You never hear anyone joke about that or downplay having CVEs. And, there's a lot of pen testers that don't have that. So you get CVEs on your resume, then you've got some things that not, people that have a lot more experience don't have. So that's great advice.
Yeah, there's people who go their whole careers that never see one. In my first month on the job, I found one on a client app. So it's kind of luck of the draw too. You might have an automated scanner picks it up. You might find it manually tested, or you could go 30 years in the field and never once find one. But like you said, it does help you stand out, in my opinion, if you can identify one and you can use that to try to leverage over other people.
That's great advice. And I know you had someone kind of help you along the way, and maybe some other mentors, but could you share your opinion on mentors, having mentors and how they can help people that are trying to get into the field?
So let's talk about Mr. Rogers, right? So Mr. Rogers, one point said, look for the helpers in the room. Mentoring isn't only reserved for the people who are best at this job. The second you know something, somebody else is going to be wondering what that question is, or how to answer that question, of which you now hold the knowledge. So sure, moving farther into your career and building that knowledge portfolio, you're well positioned to try to mentor, help, teach other people get through a problem, get to a place in their career where they're able to sustain themselves, where they're able to find employment. Part of the reason why I'm here, though, is because I made an impression by helping people. You find a Discord, you find a couple Discords. I was a community mentor on Try Hack Me for some time, not by any choice of my own. I was kind of received a message and said, "Hey, you've been selected. You really help out here. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you this title," and it made a really good impression on a lot of people. But it also feels good to help, right? And it keeps us fresh. So, like I said, don't just reserve mentoring for the people who are midway through their career or farther. Anybody can do it, and it doesn't just have to be somebody with a full knowledge set. If you've learned something, assume that somebody else does not have that. And when you see somebody else who's looking for that answer or something, help them along too. It's something that this industry, in my opinion, really lacks. There's this kind of mindset or mentality that you have to figure this out on your own. And it's just not the case. And if we want to improve the field for others who come after us, we really need to start kind of addressing that mindset and starting to help pave the path and make it better for those who come after us. So, and we do that by helping others. We do that by taking other people under our wing. We do that by teaching and instructing, and crafting that next generation. I'm that next generation. Here I'm talking about how to influence the field. But that's kind of been my MO, right? So I came into this field and made it clear that not all of us have to learn the same way. We don't learn by banging our heads on our keyboards. Some of us learn through example and through demonstration. And there's a lot of people like me, and there's a lot of people like me who are being left behind. So mentor those people, help those people, give them an example, tell them what to Google. Don't tell them to go Google it. Say, hey, because that person's already thought about it. They're stuck. Google is, researching is a skill. So everyone can mentor. Truly, you don't have to do it full time. You don't have to do it every day. You don't have to be paid $99 a month to do it or whatever. Just help. Have that drive and desire to help people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the nice things about mentors is you can get up to speed so much quicker, because I've got a really good friend of mine that I met back in my CAD drafting days, and we kind of reconnected back 2014 or 2015. And I was able to share information with him, and he was able to get up to speed a lot quicker because, you hear some people say, Google this or whatever. And, you could Google brain surgery, but doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it successfully. So when you have people that are able to share good resources with you, you're able to make leaps and bounds ahead of what you would without it. And share with each other. I mean, just sharing, study groups are great.
And it really helps us to maintain proficiency and to learn too when somebody has a problem that they don't have the solution for. And we might not have the solution for it either, right? We learn stuff all the time simply by being asked questions. It keeps us fresh, it keeps us on our toes. And this industry is one to where you cannot be expected to know everything. It's just impossible. There's just too much that's happening. So teaching, mentoring, answering questions, helping people along their path and their journey is also beneficial for the person that's doing the helping. So I cannot recommend to everybody that's going to be watching this, I can't recommend it enough to take responsibility for the field. Take responsibility for it. Don't just get your foot in the door and then forget what it was like to be outside of it. Get your foot in the door and then help others do the same. It's ours, and we have to improve it or, leave it in, this perpetual figure it out on yourself kind of mindset. And I think that we lose a lot of good talent and a lot of good opportunities for people by doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And, and don't you think as well that people that do mentoring, it kind of helps with build leadership skills?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, and you see different people, that's something I learned early on as a young fire team leader. Not everybody is the same. You can't address person A the same way as you address person B, so I think that it does absolutely help you with interpersonal skills and leadership abilities when you help people, and you can look at them individually versus kind of the greater population. And if you individualize people a bit more, it does them a service because you've got kind of this small group mentality, and it does you a service as well because you're learning more about an individual versus kind of a group of people. And you learn to deal with people in different ways. If you're just kind of the same answer or question answer response with everybody, that's fine. If you have minimal time or that's how you do things. Me, I kind of like the individual thing, talking with people one-on-one. You get to know them a little bit better. You get to understand their mindset. You can see if you can help sway their mindset or build upon your own. Maybe they're doing something amazing that you didn't think of. But it's hard to do that if you're instructing 20 or 30 people at once. So there's a lot of benefits, Phil, in my opinion, for that.
Yeah.
None of them have negative benefit to me, or negative response to me. Sure, you're gonna have some difficult people once in a while, but you should still get something out of it, even if it is, hey, this is how I got through this difficult time, or this is how I dealt with this person who was just not thankful, or was mean and not nice, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, it just helps you to help the next person better. So dealing with that worst case scenario. So we're getting down close to the end of our show. I really appreciate you joining us. Is there anything you'd like to share that we didn't cover in our discussion?
No, just to kind of drive home, be that helper and have it. And you can get to where you want to be. Just, identify the people who you need to make the correct impression on and make that impression and make yourself stand out. If you can do that and you do it long enough to the right people, you'll be on shows like this with Phillip Wylie, right? But it wasn't December 2019 when I got my EJPT, and I've kind of skyrocketed into the field and to where I'm at. And I didn't do it alone. Nobody gets to where they're at in this field by themselves. So few people. Even if they're picking on Stack Overflow and they're copying and pasting stuff, or they're going to GitHub repos, nobody got to where they're at by themselves. And be appreciative, and thinking about how to improve for those who come after you. Again, take responsibility for the industry, and don't just get in the door and never look back. We should always be looking back at the people who are coming after us.
Yeah, great thoughts there. Really, really love where you're coming from in your heart to help people. That's a great thing. The industry needs more people like you. Thanks for joining us, and I'm sure this story will be inspirational to those that listen.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Phil.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.